Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update. Viewpoint.
Welcome to Viewpoint. Just days ago, Singapore hosted the 2025 Shangri-La Dialogue, Asia's premier security summit. Now, that forum was marked by heightened tensions, with U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warning of devastating consequences should China attempt to take Taiwan, highlighting the growing urgency surrounding cross-strait tensions. And in response, China accused the U.S. of promoting a Cold War mentality and sowing regional division. Amidst these geopolitical frictions, Singapore's Defence Minister Chan Singh emphasised the importance of upholding principles over choosing sides, advocating for a global order based on law and sovereignty over choosing sides. Now, these events underscore a critical question. What defines good governance in an era of global uncertainty? Joining me today is Wei Neng, CEO of the Chandler Institute of Governance based here in Singapore. Now, his team has just released the 2025 edition of the Chandler Good Government Index, offering insights into how 120 countries are performing in building capable and trusted governments. Wei Neng, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Now, let's start with the basics. The CGGI isn't a popularity contest or a list of who's in the news. For those new to the CGGI, what is it designed to measure and how should we interpret it? Is this about which country is best or something more nuanced?
So all indices are forms of rankings, but just to say that the CGGI itself, the Chandler Good Government Index, is based on the fundamental belief that the quality of government is key to the progress of a nation. Governments, as you know, are responsible for many important things within a country, passing laws, providing basic public services, infrastructure, law and order, as you mentioned earlier. So what we seek to measure is the capabilities and the outcomes that determine the quality of good government. We focus more on the capabilities that good governments need to succeed. So these could be capabilities with leadership, with strong institutions, the ability to translate policy priorities into outcomes on the ground that matter to people, and the ability to foster attractive marketplaces, conduct international diplomacy. So these different types of capabilities that govern whether a country can deliver.
Are you talking about the 7 pillars from the CGGI?
And that's right. The CGGI is divided into 7 pillars. Each represents an area of government capabilities, whether it's institutional quality or international influence and reputation, or financial stewardship that determine whether a government has the capability to do what it needs to do. The last pillar, which we call helping people rise, is essentially a measure of the outcomes of good government, whether government is able to secure a good educational system, good healthcare system, or good public infrastructure, all of which people care for.
I really like that one, helping people rise. It puts the spotlight on upward mobility and human-centered development, doesn't it?
Yes, certainly. And that's so important these days with growing gaps. As you mentioned, gaps in wealth equality, gaps in income inequality. So social mobility is key to the index and its purpose as well. Good governments ensure what we call tall ladders, ensuring equal opportunities for people regardless of their circumstances of birth.
And this index, Wei Neng, who uses it? Governments, investors, citizens?
We designed the index being by practitioners for practitioners, by which we mean when we were developing the index, we consulted with government leaders and practitioners in countries all around the world. And indeed, it is intended for consumption by governments because we believe that governments can use the data to figure out what they're weak in, what they're better in, and how they can improve. But of course, we've also seen interest over the years from investors, from companies, and from the general public, which we're very pleased about.
Okay, let's talk rankings. Singapore is once again at the top of the index. Now, we live here, and while no system is perfect, there's definitely a sense of order and long-term planning. What's behind Singapore's staying power?
So this is an interesting feature of the index. The index works according to a statistical formula that involves data from 50 different global metrics and is aggregated using a proprietary aggregating methodology. So what this means is that Singapore's performance is not subjective, it's not something that the CIG feels is the case, but it is backed by data from credible sources, and these are all available on our website, chandlergovernmentindex.com. Singapore's success has not always been the case. When we first started the index, Singapore was not ranked number one, it was Finland. But Singapore has since overtaken Finland and other countries. Singapore started out at number 3 in the index, is now number 1, and it has carried on with its top global ranking for 3 years now. And this is generally a factor of a few things. The first is ethical leadership, the ability of leaders to make far-sighted decisions and the ability to control corruption. The governance and regulatory capability, the quality of regulations. As you say, no government is 100% perfect, but the relative quality of regulations really matters, and stable rule of law and property rights. So these, combined with financial stewardship, are the reasons why Singapore has managed to retain its top ranking over the years.
On the flip side, you've also flagged a governance gap in the index. That sounds ominous. Do tell us more.
So the governance gap is our way of observing a trend over the past few years, essentially, that the better performers in the index are getting even better, while those performing not so well in the index, their scores are declining even more. Now, there are many cases of positive and negative feedback in many different areas. You might call them vicious cycles or virtuous cycles. But the governance gap represents our observation that the quality of national governance in countries around the world is undergoing a greater and greater divergence. And because we know government is so critical for the success and development of a nation, the growing gap in governance capabilities and results may have dire consequences.
Can you explain how top countries keep improving while others stagnate or decline?
Firstly, we love to say that our index is very exciting, that ranks change wildly from year to year, but this isn't really the case. And what this tells us is that good government is not built in a day. So government is the process of an accumulation of capabilities, skills, experience, tradecraft over time. Government is both an art and a science in that sense. So better performing governments generally accumulate these capabilities, these skills, these experiences, better talent, better people, better culture. And these advantages can snowball over time. This is one big reason that's leading to the widening governance gap that we see, but it's also the result of specific performance differences in different areas. For instance, good performing governments tend to be better in financial stewardship, managing debt, managing finances, than weaker performing governments.
So it's a kind of inequality, not in wealth, but in capability.
That's right. That's a good way of looking at it.
Okay. Makes me think of two neighbors with the same income. One knows how to budget and save, the other doesn't. And over time, that difference becomes enormous. Correct?
That's true. That's indeed the case. Small differences make a big difference over time.
And one big mover this year, the UAE, broke into the top 10. That's a headline. What drove that leap?
Our data is showing that the UAE indeed made a significant improvement this year. This is the UAE's first time in the top 20. And that's really driven by certain factors within the UAE, such as improving financial stewardship and improving global influence and reputation.
And countries like Vietnam and Jordan are also climbing. And that's not something we see reflected much in global media.
Indeed, and it's an interesting observation that you made. One of the things that's surprising to us even today is that you might think that rich countries are generally better governed, and that's not always the case. We notice differences in performance at every income level. So, for instance, for low-income countries, Rwanda performs much better than some of its counterparts. For lower middle-income countries, Vietnam performs very much better than its counterparts at the same income level. So what this means is that good government is a choice. It's a factor of different choices that governments and countries make, and good government capabilities can be built and improved over time.
Let's move on to talk about a pillar that doesn't always grab headlines but might be the most urgent, financial stewardship. It saw the sharpest drop this year.
Indeed, and that broader context has been mentioned by others regards things like growing government debt. In an environment of rising interest rates over the last couple of years, it's come down somewhat, as well as the growing pressure on governments to finance expenses in many different areas. So not all spending by government is, of course, illegitimate. Some types of expenditure are very important, but it's incumbent on governments to ensure that expenditure is prudent and sustainable over time. And this is something that we in Singapore believe very much. And We see the consequences when governments are less capable in doing this. We've seen, for instance, the impact on the US credit ratings recently. And it's something that continues to concern us because over time, the ability of governments to achieve their objectives will depend not just on the skills of civil servants, but also the financial resources and the way they steward them.
Yes, it's not just about the low-income countries. Even the big players are slipping. Like you mentioned, the US, I read that it's ranked 115 out of 120 on spending efficiency.
That's right. Spending efficiency essentially benchmarks the amount of the percentage of GDP that a nation spends on something compared to the outcomes it achieves in that area. So take two countries, for instance. If one country were to spend $1 million on education and achieve certain outcomes, while another country spend the same $1 million and achieve lower outcomes, we would say the second country has a lower spending efficiency.
Another drop you flagged is global influence and reputation. Why are so many countries losing ground here, Wei Neng?
So that's a really complex and interesting question. We had the honor of interviewing Professor Tommy Koh last year for Governance Matters magazine. And Professor Koh's point is that diplomacy is an art and a science. And this reflects the growing complexity of international negotiations and the environment today. And I would say that it's not a coincidence that some countries are finding their diplomatic capabilities being strained and also finding their efforts to build positive influence, positive networks, and a positive national brand. These are getting harder and harder today. So countries with better capabilities, well-trained diplomats, a good brand presence will naturally do better than others.
Yeah, I get the sense that there's a retreat from multilateralism. So are governments struggling to sustain international partnerships, you think?
We can certainly see that it's getting more challenging to do so. The global influence and reputation pillar essentially looks at a country's ability to get its message across, to build a good brand. And this is very much useful and important to governments as they go about international relations, but also in terms of attracting capital and talent. So influence is not necessarily something used for negative means. It could mean a country's ability to portray itself in an accurate light. It could refer to a country's ability to fend off foreign attempts to manipulate domestic politics and internal affairs. So a country's influence is also linked very much to the types of capabilities that makes government succeed.
Wei Neng, very interesting points there. Let's bring it down to ground level. If you're a policymaker listening to this and thinking, where do I even start? What would you say?
And that's a really important question. Our core belief is that the quality and performance of government can be improved. CIG conducts training and practical projects and knowledge sharing with governments based on this belief. So what this means is if I were a policymaker, I'd be considering the types of capabilities I want to build, given the needs of my government and the needs of my people. I'd be considering how to improve the skills and the capabilities, but most importantly also the culture of and the ethos of civil service. And I remember that it's not a prerequisite to wait until a country gets richer before we start looking at good government. Good government is important for all countries. But paradoxically, I'd also say that it's not just enough for countries to look at basic capabilities like budgeting and data analysis today, because global complex challenges like climate change don't wait for countries to get rich. So there is a situation where countries today, unfortunately, despite their income levels, also need to invest in higher level and more advanced capabilities, despite the fact that they may still not be high-income countries.
So invest in public service is what you're saying?
Definitely. Investment in capabilities sustained over time is the one single factor that determines the quality of government.
Capabilities would include, I suppose, digitalization?
Certainly digitalization. Of course, digital is not always the answer for everything, but digital tools are very helpful to leverage and enhance the performance of individual civil servants and systems and structures. So definitely digital government is one thing. Investment in good people, investment in systems and policies and training, but also training in implementation on the ground. Sometimes we worry too much about capabilities at the ministry level, and we might neglect the capability of ground level service delivery experts.
Yeah, and that's important because it builds accountability as well.
Certainly, exactly. And accountability is so important for the performance of government.
Okay, final question. If a new leader, say a minister or head of government is tuning in right now, what's one piece of advice you'd leave them with?
I'd say that good government is not dependent on the system of government or the ideology of government. It doesn't really matter so much whether a country is rich or poor, whether it's a monarchy or democracy, that they, as a minister, are tasked with stewarding a ministry, a function, a country. At this point in time, they are tasked with stewarding a chapter in that nation's story. And this purpose, this mission of building government capabilities to leave the government and the country stronger than where it was before is one of the tasks that they are called upon to do. And it's a very important task, given that government is so closely linked to the futures of the nation.
Wow, invest in what outlasts your term, I suppose. Very powerful note to end on. Wei Neng, before we let you go, where can our listeners go to if they want to look at this year's Chandler Good Government Index in greater detail?
That's a great question. The report and the statistics, the full methodology, they're available at chandlergovernmentindex.com.
There you have it. Once again, great to have you on Money FM 89.3, Wei Neng. Thank you for the insights, for reminding us that behind every statistic is a system, and behind every system, I suppose, is a choice. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
And once again, if you want to explore the full 2025 Chandler Good Government Index, go to chandlergovernmentindex.com. We've been chatting with Wei Neng, CEO of the Chandler Institute of Governance, about this year's Chandler Good Government Index. You've been listening to Viewpoint. I'm your host, Lin Lee.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.